大家好, I'm Nathan Rich, aka 火锅大王. I proved in a previous video that Taiwan is not a country, not by any modern standard at all. If you're still confused about why, I strongly recommend you take a look at that video first. But today, I want to dive a little bit deeper on the small but important fact that some editors on Wikipedia have intentionally or otherwise gone out of the way to violate normal Wikipedia naming conventions, and in doing so, they've turned some portions of their website into a partisan platform. Taiwan, a great island. I had a lot of fun times. I enjoyed my last trip down there, and I'm sure after making all these videos I'll be welcomed with open arms on my next trip. It's one of the most politically interesting parts of China, but as I already mentioned, it is part of China. It's under de facto control by the ROC government, but the PRC has the de jure sovereignty, which is the qualifier for being an independent sovereign nation or country. In other words, it's not only part of China, but the PRC is widely, overwhelmingly, and increasingly recognized as the sole government of all of China, including Taiwan. But again, go watch that other video if you want to go through the facts. This video is about a Wikipedia article. So if I happen to look up Taiwan on Wikipedia, I would expect to see one of the following descriptions of the ROC state: de facto state, breakaway state, secessionist state, self-declared state, unrecognized state, partially recognized state, any combination thereof, or something similar. That's because that's what Taiwan is. Wikipedia, for those who don't know, isn't an encyclopedia. It doesn't rely on facts, but rather on reported to be facts. The difference is, even if you can prove that you are an expert on a subject, you cannot add a fact just because you know it to be true and can prove it. It must be published somewhere that they've deemed reliable, such as a news agency, a book, or something like that. Sometimes this method is a power for neutrality, but as I found time and time again with political or controversial pages, it can also be a power for political activism. For example, a news article may come out that uses someone familiar with the details as a source to make a claim, but since that news agency has been deemed reliable, that unnamed anonymous source's description of events can often make its way to Wikipedia. It's not a perfect system by any means, though it's not too difficult to empathize with their policies given how crazy the internet is. Anyway, that's a discussion perhaps for another video. So let's do some comparing and contrasting when it comes to how Wikipedia is presenting Taiwan. Here's a list of every non-UN state which has a sovereignty dispute in the entire world, according to Wikipedia. Let's go through them one by one, looking closely at the primary qualifiers of de facto sovereignty and de jure sovereignty. Again, if you don't know what I just said, watch the other video first. Some of the exact numbers and dates are approximate, but nothing is falsified, and these should be generally accurate. Here we go. This is all of them, by the way. I have not left anything out. This is every single one listed on Wikipedia. Most or all of these states have unofficial diplomatic relations with countries. That doesn't have anything to do with actual de jure sovereignty, as we'll soon see. Unofficial diplomacy could only ever be used to prove a state was de facto sovereign. De jure necessarily means official. So let's see here. The Republic of Abkhazia declared independence in 1993 and is recognized by 8 states. However, it's not in the UN. Those are items we consider towards its de jure sovereignty. It has a military, its own currency, it has its own passports and its own constitution. It seems to have de facto sovereignty. But 8 states recognizing it is not even close to a majority, so I wouldn't call it a country. Let's see if I'm right. Wikipedia calls it a de facto state. Yep, sounds about right. The Republic of Artsakh declared independence in 1991 and is recognized by 3 states. However, it's not in the UN. It has a military, its own currency, passport, and constitution, so it does seem to have de facto sovereignty, but not de jure sovereignty. In other words, we don't call it a country. Let's see what Wikipedia calls it. A breakaway state, not a country. Republic of South Ossetia. The state of Alania declared independence in 1992, not in the UN. 5 states recognize it. Doesn't have its own currency, but it does have the other de facto sovereignty items. And Wikipedia says it's a de facto state. Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic, also known as Transnistria, declared independence in 1990, not in the UN. 3 states recognize it. Has all the de facto qualifiers. Once again, I would say it's not a country. Wikipedia calls it a breakaway state. The Republic of Kosovo declared independence in 2008 and is recognized by a staggering 116 states. That is a majority. But it's not part of the UN, which leaves doubt about how extensive that recognition is. It uses the euro, which might or might not count as its own currency for our sake, but it does have a military, passport, and constitution. So if I had to guess, I would say it's probably not a country because the lack of UN membership suggests the recognition it's getting is incomplete. But it's definitely the closest so far. Let's see what Wikipedia says it is. A partially recognized state. Oh, okay, makes sense. It's not a country. Though I may have accepted it being called one depending on what further research would reveal about its recognition. Moving on. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus declared independence in 1983, not in the UN. Only one state recognizes it. Has a military, passport, and constitution, but not its own currency. Still, it sounds like it does have de facto sovereignty, but in this case, it does not have de jure sovereignty and thus is not a country. Let's see what Wikipedia calls it. A de facto state. Again, makes perfect sense. It's not a country because it doesn't have the majority de jure and the majority de facto sovereignty. Republic of Somaliland. Declared independence in 1991, not in the UN, no states recognize it, and it does have the de facto qualifiers. So again, not a country. Wikipedia? Self-declared country, de facto state. I'd say the use of the word country there is a bit questionable, but at least it should be clear that that's what it says. It's not what Wikipedia is saying. Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic declared independence in 1976. Not in the UN. A healthy 40 states recognize it, but that's still the minority. It does have military, passports, currency, and constitution. Still, I would say it's not a country. What does Wikipedia say? It's a partially recognized de facto state. Yeah. And here we go, finally. The Republic of China, Taiwan. Let's see, Taiwan or the Republic of China has never declared independence from China or the PRC. It's not in the UN. Only 15 states recognize it. It has military, currency, passport, and constitution. See how easy this is? It has local de facto sovereignty, but not de jure sovereignty. It's not a country. And Wikipedia says country. That's it. That's all of them. Spot the difference? So how did Wikipedia get this so wrong? Well, we can actually see the discussion thread on what Taiwan should be called. Let's take a look. Bizarrely, the discussion starts with this comment. There has been much debate and no consensus formed over whether to use the term country or state when referring to Taiwan. Shouldn't the consensus be to call it the thing that it is? A state? Oh, that's right. Wikipedia is often not based on fact, but on what news agencies, mostly Western, and other sources say is a fact. But anyway, let's take a look at the editor's commentary. This guy says it should be called a de facto state, and he's correct because that's what it is. I also would have accepted the other names I mentioned earlier because, again, those are accurate. This guy blows my mind by saying Taiwan is not a breakaway state, and then says it should be called a country, which would literally be a breakaway state. His reason? Well, Taiwan is big and old. Someone adds to his comment a bunch of things that, again, do absolutely nothing at all to establish de jure sovereignty. And another person jumps in, essentially calling people who don't go out of their way to call Taiwan a country against all evidence ignorant. His reason? Taiwan has a passport. Again, irrelevant. It's irrelevant because de jure sovereignty is established by official recognition by the majority of UN members or countries. It has nothing at all to do with passports. And speaking of which, in one of the most Wikipedia-like replies I've ever seen, one guy says to call it a de facto state because the sovereignty of Taiwan is disputed by 93% of the world UN countries. And the reply he gets is, UN countries are not reliable sources though. For our purposes, they're irrelevant. And not only is that comment not immediately flagged as spam, people reply to it in support of it. Imagine saying aloud that when deciding if UN countries officially recognize Taiwan as a country, the UN countries themselves are not reliable sources of said recognition. This is the magical world of wordplay, dear viewer. The thread goes on and is filled with little gems like this one. Nobody refers to PRC as a state. Why does this article? Well, both are states. But the PRC is also a country, while the ROC isn't one. By saying country, you are in fact calling it a state as well. I feel like some of these people are intentionally misleading, But I have no evidence of that, so I need to stick with the simplest solution. Perhaps they are just ignorant of the facts, I suppose. But that begs the question. If they don't understand that the word country contains within it that the item is also a state, why on earth would we care what they think about what Taiwan should be called? But this has to be my favorite argument. Guys, we can't call Taiwan a state because confused editors are asking why Taiwan is a state like California or New York. That's right, because some people don't understand what the word state means. Taiwan, and only Taiwan for some reason, should be called a country when it's actually a state. And even calling it a state in this context is a bit controversial, to be honest with you. It's a state like Sichuan is a state. In other words, it's a province in China, or at most a de facto state in that context. Anyway, the debate goes on and on and on, and I'm not going to go through all of it with you, but if you're bored enough to read it, you'll notice something quite interesting. Most of the best points are made by the smaller group of people. Meanwhile, the larger number of people seem to have little or no understanding of the subject, but they got their way. And if that isn't a clear example of one of the deficits of truth by numbers, I really don't know what is. Less people were right, but more people were wrong. So we went with the wrong. Sorry to everyone who really feels like Taiwan is a country, but it isn't. It hasn't declared independence, it has almost no official recognition at all, and by any common standard we can hold, it just isn't a country, no matter what some people want, no matter what Wikipedia says, no matter how many news agencies or books say it is. Sometimes people really do just call things certain words because of other motivations. Sometimes truth is more important than feelings. Until next time, thanks everybody. See ya.